Today is Monday, April 20th, and this is VOA's International Edition. I'm Lori Lunden in Washington. Coming up, the pandemic crisis in New York is improving, but the governor says there's still a long way to go.
That's good news only compared to the terrible news that we were living with, which is that constant increase. And remember, you still have 1,300 people who walked into the hospitals yesterday testing positive.
A deadly mass shooting over the weekend in Canada.
In excess of 10 people have been killed, but the investigation is still ongoing.
And a who's who of pop culture unites for the One World Coronavirus Special. It's all on today's International Edition. The United States has reached another grim milestone with now more than 41,000 American deaths due to COVID-19. The U.S. has by far the world's largest number of confirmed coronavirus cases with more than 740,000 infections. Governors across the country say they cannot safely reopen their states without testing, and they say they don't have enough. But President Trump on Sunday touted what he said was a record number of tests being done.
And our testing is expanding very rapidly by millions and millions of people.
In an interview with ABC's This Week on Saturday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she is concerned about how President Trump has led the country in the crisis.
If he continues to predicate the action that we take on a false premise, then we're in further danger. And his earlier delay and denial caused deaths.
Meanwhile, the coronavirus death toll in New York has dropped again, a sign Governor Andrew Cuomo says means the state is on the other side of the plateau. But he says this is no time to get cocky and reopen too soon, especially without all the funds needed from the federal government. AP correspondent Julie Walker reports.
Cuomo says 507 people died Saturday, and while every death is a tragedy, the day before there were 540.
All indications at this point are that we are on a descent. Whether or not the descent continues depends on what we do.
The governor says 1,300 people went into the hospital Saturday with coronavirus, and while that number is also down, New Yorkers still have to remain vigilant.
It's no time to get cocky, and it's no time to get arrogant, right? We still have a long way to go.
And he warns against reopening too soon, saying if we went through all of this only to go back and start over,
then shame on us.
Cuomo continues to say the state needs more money from the feds and says it will start its own antibody test this week. Julie Walker, New York.
Governors across the U.S. are going slowly in their efforts to relax precautions against the virus's spread, and that is not sitting well with some of their citizens. AP correspondent Ben Thomas reports.
Quarantine the sick, but not the whole population.
Protests against stay-at-home orders took place Saturday in several cities, including Indianapolis and Austin, Texas.
There are a lot of protests out there.
At the White House Saturday evening, President Trump was asked whether he saw the demonstrations against stay-at-home orders as a protest against the guidelines the White House has been advocating.
I just think that some of the governors have gotten carried away. You know, we have a lot of people that don't have to be told.
But White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx says the rate of hospitalizations is down, and data from the nation's largest metropolitan areas show social distancing is working.
Most of the metro areas never had an issue of complete crisis care.
Ben Thomas, Washington.
President Trump last week announced a three-stage plan for restarting normal life in the U.S. In the first phase, partial reopen can include places of worship, restaurants, and movie theaters, but with strict physical distancing. Also last week, Harvard University researchers said people around the world might need to practice some level of social distancing through 2022 to stop COVID-19 from surging again, unless hospital capacity is increased or effective vaccines and treatments are developed. VOA senior analyst Mohammed El-Shanawi discussed the developments with Fahim Yunus, associate professor and chief of infectious diseases at the University of Maryland.
I think to some degree that is correct because we don't have a treatment, we don't have a vaccine. The best defense, we have these non-pharmacological measures like social distancing. And we don't even know everything about the virus yet. Much of what we learn is from non-peer-reviewed frontline experiences. And we know the favorite way this virus spreads is through droplet. It requires a human being close to you. So I do think that when we reopen or when we relax these restrictions, it'll be very important for people to wear masks, because my mask protects you and your mask protects me. When we don't infect and we don't transmit the virus as much when we are wearing a mask, and maintaining 6 feet social distancing, maintaining good hand washing, and then trying to keep our fever check, I think those modalities will help us continue to flatten the curve.
The Harvard researchers also said the course of coronavirus pandemic will depend on answering 3 questions. 1, will the virus spread change with seasons? 2, what immunity will people have after being infected? 3, does exposure to coronavirus strain that causes milder illnesses provide protection against the other strain which causes COVID-19? Are there any answers to these questions coming soon?
This is a frustrating part of this new virus. We don't know the final answers to these great questions, and I think they're the right questions. My 20 years of experience, however, I do feel that there is a good chance this virus may stick around. We may continue to have small peaks and troughs. If there's an outbreak in a nursing home, that's going to overload that community in some cases. If there's an outbreak in a prison system, that may overload a hospital. Once we open the schools, we may have to deal with very different dynamics in the fall. And then this virus, my worry is, will it blend in with our flu season, which may start early this year, or the viral illnesses that are routine and will come in the winter season? So yes, it may blend in. I do believe that a majority of people will be immune after they fully recover from this infection. Whether that immunity lasts 6 months or 6 years, we don't know. And as far as cross immunity, which means whether exposure to other prevalent endemic coronaviruses will offer any immunity against this strain, is an absolute open question. We have no idea what the answer is there, and we'll have to wait for the data.
President Trump is eager to reopen the country and resume economic activities. From an infectious diseases point of view, what is needed to avoid another severe coronavirus outbreak with reopening the country?
First of all, I think the country needs to know that this should be a dynamic process. We can reopen the country, but if we don't have the right infrastructure in place, we may have to go back to restrictions and lockdowns. I hope that never happens. In terms of what's needed, there is enough experience coming out of Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea, New Zealand, countries that have successfully controlled it. And I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. This is what's needed. Number one, adequate point-of-care testing. By that I mean as prevalent as a strep test. Somebody goes to their doctor's office, waits in the waiting room for 30 minutes, and they tell him whether you're strep positive or negative. Once we have that sort of testing available, I don't think we need to think in terms of how many millions. The simple question is adequate. It should be adequate for every urgent care center, doctor, nurse, hospital, nursing home facilities. Once we have adequate testing, we will be in good shape. Second thing is, ideally, and again, the stress here is on the word ideal, if we had enough N95 masks for all the healthcare workers and then even for high-risk people out in the community, we know that's a better mask. We know that it offers better protection. But right now the struggle is we don't have enough of them. So we have to prioritize healthcare workers. Having adequate N95 masks will be awesome. The third part is antibody testing. With every passing week, every passing month, more and more people are getting infected and also becoming immune. Once we know how much of our population is immune, that gives us some comfort. And as I said earlier, I think the last thing which is important for any reopening is to keep an open mind. By that I mean we have to understand that if things got out of hands again in the fall, or if we faced another peak, we may have to go to shutdowns again.
Senior World Health Organization officials say there is no evidence that people who have survived a bout of coronavirus become immune from the deadly disease and cannot pass the infection on to others. Lisa Schlein reports for VOA from Geneva.
The coronavirus pandemic continues to spread across the world with breathtaking speed and no immediate end in sight. Anxious governments increasingly are grabbing onto the hope that those who have become sickened by this infectious disease will become immune and not pass it on to others. They are pinning their hopes on serologic tests that look for antibodies in a person's immune system to clarify the number of people who have been exposed to the virus. Knowing this, they argue, would allow them to send these people back into the workforce without risk of their getting infected or of infecting others. But head of WHO's Emerging Diseases and Zoonosis Unit, Maria van Kerkhoff, says these serologic tests may not be able to provide the information governments are seeking.
Right now, we have no evidence that the use of a serologic test can show that an individual is immune or is protected from reinfection. What the use of these tests will do will measure the level of antibodies, and it's a response that the body has a week or two later after they've been infected with this virus.
These tests will be able to measure the level of antibodies, but Van Cove says that does not mean that somebody with antibodies is immune to the disease. Executive Director of WHO Health Emergencies, Michael Ryan, cautions countries to be prudent and not fix on these tests as a way of establishing the status of an individual. He says there's a lot of uncertainty about the effectiveness of the available tests.
Nobody is sure whether someone with antibodies is fully protected against having the disease or being exposed again. Plus, some of the tests have issues of sensitivity. They may give a false negative result, and we may actually have someone who believes they're seropositive and protected actually in a situation where they may be exposed, and in fact, they are susceptible to the disease.
Ryan says a lot of work still lies ahead to standardize the tests and make sure they are validated. He says great care must be taken to ensure they are not misused, but are used in ways that enhance public health. Lisa Schlein for VOA News, Geneva.
Here are some of the other stories we are following at VOA. Days before the holy fasting month of Ramadan begins, the Islamic world is grappling with an untimely paradox of the new coronavirus pandemic. Enforced separation at a time when socializing is almost sacred. The holiest month in the Islamic calendar is one of family and togetherness, community, reflection, charity, and prayer. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro on Sunday again attended a public rally and attacked lockdown measures meant to fight the coronavirus as supporters of the right-wing leader joined political motorcades around the country. Brazil has more cases of the new coronavirus than any other country in Latin America. On Sunday, confirmed cases rose to 38,654, with more than 2,400 deaths. Wearing face masks, waving black flags, and keeping 2 yards apart, thousands of Israelis demonstrated against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu under strict coronavirus restrictions on Sunday. Netanyahu, who denies any wrongdoing, is under criminal indictment in 3 corruption cases. Stay with VOA for all the latest world news. Canadian